17.3 Skeletal muscle. Some things about skeletal muscles before we look at the microscopic anatomy and the physiology of contraction. Skeletal muscles work in pairs. They can only do work when they are contracting, and so we have to have muscles either in pairs or pairs of opposing groups. So the muscle that is contracting to produce movement is called the prime mover, sometimes the agonist. Well, simultaneously, some other muscles must be lengthening or relaxing, and these would be called the antagonist. And so the roles certainly are going to change depending on the movement that is being produced. This movement we call the action. We'll look at some examples in a moment of different actions. We can also, when we examine muscles, look at the points of attachment where they are attached to bone. The origin is the attachment that is closer to the midline of the body, and the insertion is the point of attachment that's further away from the body. So as muscles contract, depending on their points of attachment, a specific movement or action will be produced. Some examples of action. Extension is going to increase the angle between bones. So whenever we straighten our arm, that would be extension. Flexion will decrease the angle. So as we are bending the arm, that would be flexion. Or if we make a fist, we would be flexing the fingers. When we open our hands back up, that again would be extension. Here's another pair. Adduction is moving a limb towards the midline. So if you have your arm raised out to the side and you move it back down towards your body, that would be adduction. Abduction means to move a limb away from the midline. And then rotation is another common movement. Rotation is where a bone pivots on its longitudinal axis. Muscle names look really scary, but many times the name tells us a lot about the muscle. Sometimes we can learn something about the size. So for example, the gluteus maximus. Maximus means large. There's another that's called the gluteus minimus, which is a smaller muscle. Shape. So for example, the deltoid is the muscle over the shoulder. Delta means triangle. If we take that muscle off of the body and lay it flat, it is shaped like a triangle. Sometimes the name tells us something about location. If you remember, where is the frontal lobe of the cerebrum and the frontal bone of the skull? How about the frontalis muscle? So in this case, the name tells us exactly where it's located. The direction of the fibers is sometimes included in the name. Rectus means straight. So if the fibers of the muscle run straight with the axis of the bone, it would be rectus. So femoris is the large bone of the upper leg. So the rectus femoris is a muscle that runs along the femur. Transverse means that it runs perpendicular to the axis of the bones, or sometimes oblique, which means they run at an angle. The number of attachments sometimes is included. The tricep brachii is the muscle in the back of the arm, and it has 3 points of attachment. So tricep refers to those 3 attachments. The term brachii or brachial refers to the upper arm. And sometimes the action of the muscle is included. Here's a good example. The extensor digitorum is a muscle that extends the digits. So if you recall extension, for example, if you have a fist and you open your hand, that would be extending the digits. And so if you take a moment and you can just feel those muscles in the forearm as they work, and you could probably figure out which muscles are the extensor muscles. Be some muscles of the forearm. So here's a diagram that just shows many of the 600 plus muscles of the body. We will learn a few of these in lab. It'll be a pretty short list, but don't spend hours and hours memorizing and learning these muscles at this point. But you can look at the various names and consider some of these things we've just discussed and see that many times the name does help tell us something about the location or the action or the size of the muscle.